Welcome back, everybody. This is Mike Del Pre, Executive Director of the Arizona Real Estate Investors Association. I'm here with Zona Law's Mark Zinman, and we're going to bring back part two, right? So if you missed part one, you can go to our YouTube page and watch part one of how we discussed how to protect yourself against squatters. So recently, Bill SB 1129 was vetoed by Governor Hobbs. So we brought in Mark Zinman to break that down for us, let us know what it means to us as real estate investors here in Arizona. And what we're going to kick off with is Florida Governor DeSantis slammed Hobbs' veto. The governor of Arizona just vetoed a bill we signed here in Florida so these squatters could be evicted. DeSantis said, what kind of message does that send? Mark Zinman?
Yeah, I don't know if I can touch on the message that sends, especially considering we're a border state and all the issue that this has been covering on social media. It's interesting you say this is part two. This is probably the mea culpa on the part one. I was part right and part wrong on this one. I was unaware of the passing, the bill running through. It was kind of a sleeper to some extent. I did speculate that if it made it to the governor's desk, that she would veto it. So I guess I was 50-50 on that one, which I'm not sure is good or bad, but we basically proposed a bill identical to what Florida had passed. I mean, verbatim took a lot of the affidavit that, an owner could use to remove a squatter from the property, and took it from Florida. And obviously our governor vetoed it. So it's now dead and not going anywhere. So you basically just default to what has been in existence already, Mike.
Got it. So maybe just briefly give us an idea of what that bill entailed. So for those that are new to this.
Yeah, and I think it's important to understand what it is and also what it's not, the issues we're talking about. A lot of people confuse this with adverse possession, which adverse possession is if you stay on somebody's land and you think it's yours for 10 years and you treat it like it's yours. After 10 years, you actually own that property. I mean, think about two lands next to each other with the fence in the wrong place. Well, if the fence has been there for 10 years or more, that land actually becomes the other party's. That's adverse possession. That's different than what we're talking about. With squatters, which is getting a lot of national attention right now, squatters is just talking about the right to possession. They're people that unlawfully access the property. They have no right to be there. It's not that they claim they own it, but they're claiming they have tenants' rights or quote unquote squatters' rights that they can't be physically removed without going through the eviction process. And so what's happening is across the country, if you have a slow means of evicting somebody can illegally move into your property and then they're there as long as the court process takes. Now, fortunately, Arizona is not that bad going through the court process, but the idea that you have to go to the courts and seek relief for somebody that's staying in your property illegally is crazy. It's not a case of where you have a tenant, whether it's an oral lease or a written lease. And it's where you have a vacant home and the people just move into the vacant home and claim they have a right to be there. That's what this issue is focused on. So it's really, really narrow, which is why it's kind of remarkable that it was vetoed, because a lot of, I think, the press that covered it didn't accurately represent what the issue is.
And so what our members or homeowners and real estate investors, do they go back to part one of the video, so to speak, like to protect themselves? So is there any really major issues or changes we should worry about?
No, this is one of those cases where no change is what you have to worry about.
Okay.
But you kind of had hoped something would change for the better. But in terms of what the legal processes are, you're exactly correct. We're staying the course. Nothing has changed. No new law has been passed. Therefore, the old processes of what we talked in part one, those entirely still apply. The hope is, of course, if the bill passed, then it gave owners and also the police one extra avenue to remove somebody that's unlawfully possessing a property.
So how does this go along with, I know we had discussions in the past about the proposed anti-landlord bills. Now, we just talked about the, what was the other one I just brought up before we got on here?
The Starter Home Act.
The Starter Home Act, and then those the squatters. So what's in general, what are your thoughts on where our state's going and how does that affect investors?
Our state is definitely in a transition period right now. We've got an election in November. We'll see the results of everything from, where we are with the abortion ruling from the Arizona Supreme Court, and also whether the legislature deals with that and repeals the pre-statehood law as well to see where voters come out. But we're definitely changing as a state politically. And with that, one of those topics, of course, is landlord tenant that really is impacted almost immediately. It is changing property owners' rights. And that's definitely something that investors should watch carefully, because depending on what happens in the election, there are such things as, rent control would be a very real threat come January, depending on what happens in the election. There's also been talks in the past of trying to, delay the eviction process, saying, this is really, it's obviously unfortunate when people have to go through the eviction process. The flip side as well is that it's unfortunate when somebody has to pay a mortgage and their rent isn't paid. And, the longer you take an eviction dragged out, you go from 1 month to 2. I mean, that's a very significant impact upon the property owner that has to pay their mortgage, and they're not given a reprieve despite the issues.
Understood. Perfect. So, well, in regards to the squatter bill, I mean, I guess it's pretty self-explanatory and pretty simple. Anything else you want to throw out there that we should know?
No, I think it's just good to know. I mean, what it would have done, it would have basically given an owner a right to just sign an affidavit saying, look, the person's not my tenant. They've never been a tenant. They've never paid rent. So it has literally nothing to do with the Landlord Tenant Act. It doesn't expedite evictions in those cases. But if the person's literally just in the home without any right to be, it would give the owner the right to sign an affidavit, and then the police could remove them. The benefit of that, and even the protection for the person, is that person that's being removed would even have a right to sue the owner if they falsified an affidavit or something was inaccurate about it. So the fact that it was fought so hard, and the fact that the governor vetoed it, was unfortunate, I think. It's interesting, there was a wide coalition of different entities that actually opposed it very actively. There's a Arizona Coalition to End Domestic Violence, the state chapter of the NAACP, the William Morris Institute for Justice, Arizona Housing Coalition, and then also the League of Cities and Towns. I mean, those are very powerful entities with an ear to the governor. And so that's kind of what befell the issue. You have to realize, this is part of how the sausage gets made. And if you don't understand the legislative stuff and what actually sways not just your legislators, but your governor controlling these things, it's definitely a good time to learn it and get actively involved, whether through ASREA, through any other association you can. It's important that if these issues matter to you, you get your voice out there. And I would say, especially for Arizona, the ASREA members, when these issues come up in 2025, and they will, regardless of what side of the fence you're on, it's important that when the legislators are looking at these bills, like rent control, like slowing evictions, like modifying other rights that you have as a property owner, that you go to the legislature and actually testify. The biggest impact, legislators can debate all these issues. They can hear from attorneys, but let's be honest, nobody wants to hear from an attorney. What they want to hear from is the individual that is retiring and lives on that income and that needs that, or the family that has that as their kid's education fund. I mean, those are the stories. And if you're not active, laws will be passed without you, and you'll have no say. And that is your way of controlling the future of the state.
Awesome, man. Well said, man. I think pretty straightforward. Great advice. ASREA, we're here to help. Mark's here to help. How do we get hold of you, Mark, if anyone needs any advice for any legal services?
Yeah, absolutely. Always best way to call us, just 480-949-1400. We're always here.
Awesome, man. Really appreciate your time. And that's a wrap, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you so much.